Hey everyone, before we get into this episode, I do have a special announcement. Our 5-year anniversary is coming up soon, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been 5 years almost.
Yeah, so we are going to have an extra episode come out, a bonus episode. And during that episode, we'll also be answering some questions from you guys, hopefully. So if you have questions for us, either, about who we are, what we like to do, our favorite colors, favorite characters, anything about the books, anything, pretty much at all, we'll pick some questions and put that in the bonus episode. So please let us know what you're thinking, what you're curious about. If a question that you had never really fit into any of the episodes, here's your chance to ask. You can email us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can comment on any of our social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube.
Threads.
Yep, Threads as well, and we're on Reddit, or all it is Fitzhappy on all of those. And you can also message us directly on some of those as well. Just make sure, if you're commenting about that, mention somewhere in the post that this is for the 5-year anniversary questions, because we still want to do some questions at the end of the episodes like normal and have our continued conversations about that. So just make sure you're marking them out, and we'll include them in that episode.
Yeah, we're really excited. Can't believe it's almost been 5 years.
Yeah.
Congrats, everybody.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitzhappy. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And we're discussing chapter 30 this week, Convergence. And since we're getting to the end of the book, lots of point of view shifting.
Yes.
Jump around quite a bit, and I think the episodes are going to be a lot of discussions about that, and longer because of that switch often. But we start with Paragon. And the whole scene there, Paragon, Brashen, Amber. And this scene, specifically where we're coming in, is Amber finishing her carving of Paragon.
Of his new face.
Yes.
So last time we left the crew, I believe they were on their way to Key Island after the whole almost being killed by Paragon and Kennit ordeal. And Amber had made a promise to the dragons to recarve the face to give Paragon eyes again. And they had come to the understanding that they needed to help Althea, and Althea was actually alive. So this is after that has happened.
After they pick up Mother.
Yes. After. Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. I forgot.
This is after the island.
So last time we saw them, they had just picked up Mother, and Amber had to stop her. She had marked up Paragon's face, but hadn't started carving.
Mm-hmm. And now we're jumping in a little bit later where she is finishing up the major changes that she has done. And the last thing here is a large earring. So Amber is saying like, hey, your eyes are done. You could open them and look around if you want. And Paragon's saying, I'll do it when the time is right. The time isn't right yet. And we know that he opens his eyes pretty much right near the end when they meet up with Kennit again.
Right.
But for now, he has the earring in his hand and is still making guesses about what things look like. And Amber, says he's pretty much got it spot on. It's a silver net with a blue gemstone caught in it. It matches an earring I wear. And she puts the earring in his ear.
I found that little detail really interesting because I do believe that we have had descriptions from Althea of the earrings that Amber wears, and I thought it was an egg and a dragon.
No, that was beads that she picked up while she was searching through a basket of beads at Amber's shop. She describes like being there an egg and a dragon in one of those.
Yeah. But I think she like looks at, I thought there was a whole scene where she's describing what is being worn by Amber on her ears, and she picks out the egg from the thing, but Amber is wearing like a serpent on one ear and an egg on the other.
I don't remember that.
Maybe it wasn't an egg, maybe it was a dragon. I don't know. It just like there were two different earrings, but I do not remember one of them being a silver net with a blue gem.
I do remember, I mean, I could be making this up in my mind too, but I do remember something about like a wooden cage for that earring. She crafted like a protective cage around that, but we know that this is originally Byrric's grandmother's earring, who was given to Fitz by Patience.
Yes.
And then Fitz gave it to the Fool.
Well, I guess why would it be described as having a wooden cage?
That's the only thing I remember from it.
Oh.
You know, it was in my mind, if this is real, again, I don't know if it is. If this is real, it's Amber creating like a protective cage for it. That's the only description that I remember in my mind. I don't remember anything else, any other earrings that were described like you're saying. Okay, for the sake of clarity, we did look it up. And Emma is correct. It is her earrings are described as one is a serpent and one is a dragon, but she is wearing 4 mismatched earrings, and we don't get descriptions of the others. However, there is also when Fitz gives the Fool the earring, says, "Disguise it if you must, but wear it."
Right.
And obviously, Amber in this scene is like, it matches the one I'm giving you. Paragon matches the one that I wear. So she was wearing something that, like a wood covering her earring.
Potentially.
Well, Althea describes them as all wood.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
So it is disguised somehow. So no mention of a cage that I can find out. I don't know where I got that from, but yeah, it was covered up.
Right. So interesting that Fool, I guess Amber has 4 earrings. Love that little detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fun. We didn't miss something. I was wondering because I knew that there was that scene where Althea specifically notices the earrings.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I was annoyed with reading this the first time, because I remembered that scene and then read this and was like, okay, well, if Althea would have seen the net earring, I would have known for sure it was beloved well before.
Right.
I guess at the time, Fool, we didn't know. For some readers, you don't know Fool's real name is Beloved, but
yeah,
I would have known, which obviously is also why she only focuses on the dragon and serpent earrings.
Yeah, Robin Hobb can't give away the game that quickly.
Exactly. You know? So, okay, touche. But here is a really good indicator for anybody who is reading the books in order.
Yes.
That this is Beloved.
Mm-hmm. So we learn that Paragon has been ingesting his wood chips every day so as not to lose anything, and he makes a claim that he has not lost any of his memories. And he talks about how he no longer hides from his memories, and that Mother spends each day on the foredeck with his logbooks. On wet days, she sheltered herself and her books under a flap of canvas. He could not understand the gabbling of her truncated tongue, but that did not matter. She sat on his deck and leaned against his railing as she read. Through her, the ancient memories came trickling back to him. Recorded in those books were the sparse observations of his captains through the years. It did not matter. The notations were touchstones for memories of his. This I highlighted because it goes back to our conversation in the first book about logbooks and Liveship memories and how he forgot things.
Right.
So this is kind of a theory that I had, and I guess that theory was born out of half-remembered things from the books.
Right.
So it's good to see that the logbooks themselves are not necessarily magical houses of memories for them, right?
Right.
It just is something that reminds them of what's been going on.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting way to go about this, because if you think about it, these are immortal beings, basically.
Yeah.
And Paragon's been around for, I don't know, maybe 100 years.
Probably a little bit over, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's a lot of years to remember everything. Like, I don't even remember what I did last week on Tuesday. So, I think if I had 100 years worth of memories, it would be really hard to remember everything. So
We have to remember too that Paragon wants to forget, right? That was
Also
his
that.
job. That was his job from Kennit. Just like lose these memories. And he's been trying so hard to. And he hasn't had a person from his family on board him
Right.
for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's very, very easy, as we see in other points of view, to kind of lose your sense of self. And if you're running from the dragon parts of you, then you're running from all the rest of your memories and their ability to house memories and cherish those. So yeah, it's no wonder that he's kind of losing parts of himself.
Right. Yeah. And I guess after a certain point in time, when you start losing enough, it becomes scary to think about the memories, especially when Paragon
Right.
has so many bad memories. Because obviously the good memories are going to be the first to go, right? Those aren't going to haunt you. So I think it would make sense that after so much time trying to push away the memories, that the only memories left are the ones that you wouldn't want to remember anyway. And those are plaguing him. And of course, he's going to, shy away from that. So I don't know. I think it's a nice little interesting detail and good that he gets sense of self back.
Mm-hmm. So the earring is in his ear. He asks Amber if he got it right, meaning the color, and Amber agrees. So he can infuse these things with color as he wants, apparently.
Well, it's really unclear. So I can't tell if it's the intention of the carver that sets the colors,
Right.
or Paragon contributing to it, because
maybe a bit of both.
Yeah, because I know a lot of times when Liveships quicken, I think whenever Vivacia was quickening, everybody was really wondering, sort of what Vivacia would look like,
Right.
and what the coloring would be. And I think that's something like, did the carver think, oh, this is going to be a black-haired beauty or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know later one of the things is Paragon's eyes are not the same color as Fitz's eyes.
Right.
I think he has blue eyes like Kennit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has those piercing light blue eyes.
Yes. So I think that's, maybe it is the ship that has some sway. I'm not really sure, but I thought it was really interesting that he seems to say, like, did I get it right, as though it is something that he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But also, can you tell if that's the intention, that it comes out perfectly and that was the intention of the carver?
Right. Yeah. Probably a little combo of both,
Yeah.
I would guess. So they go into it that immediately after Key Island, Amber had climbed up onto the foredeck with her tools and got to work. She claims right now that he is done except for some final touches and some ornamentation on some things. But she had kind of reshaped his whole face and his whole body to keep it in proportion, and then used those extra scraps to make extra things, like he has an axe now.
Weird.
Yeah, interesting. But in Robin Hobb fashion, this kind of is a flashback during the present here,
Right.
of how Amber worked and how she met and spoke with Mother about this. And Mother seemed to approve of his reshaping after she looked at Amber's plans. Once, when Brashen cautioned her against keeping such hours because Amber had spent a long time on deck, day in and day out, doing this, she had replied that this work was better than sleeping for restoring her soul. Her healing injuries did not slow her. Not only her tools flew over his countenance, but she had a trick of using her fingers as well. He had never felt a touch like hers. A press of her fingertips could smooth a line, while a brushing touch erased a jagged spot. Even now, as she encountered a rough bit, she dabbed at the grain of his face and it aligned under her tingling touch. You loved him, didn't you? Of course I did. Now stop asking about it.
So before we get into that, I just want to touch back on the fact that she's using her skill hands
Yes.
to smooth the wood and push it into place.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, is this part of what's making Paragon a little bit more stable? The intention of coming together and being...
It could be, but the only thing that prevents me from saying like, oh, that's definitely it, is that it requires a ton of silver later on to truly awaken them.
Right.
And there's no descriptions of like the silver kind of seeping in to the wizard wood or anything like that, and nothing like is diminished from Amber's hands. I don't know.
But, well, I'm not even saying that necessarily, but like how the construction workers would have made the skill road in the past. You create with skill touched gloves or whatever and create this block and you tell it is a road and it will stay in this line or whatever, and you encourage it.
Yeah, it could be that Amber put that intention.
So I'm wondering if maybe that's part of the uplifted mood and the more cohesive nature of Paragon and his dragons that's happening now. I mean, it feels like a natural change that's happening, that he's like becoming more accepting. So maybe it isn't doing anything, but I just remembered how skill workers used to work with the skill. And even if Amber wasn't trying to do that on purpose, by doing the same process, she may have unknowingly created a more peace within Paragon.
Yeah, that's definitely
A
possible.
little happy accident, maybe.
Bob Ross Paragon here.
Yeah, no mistakes, only happy accidents.
So yeah, Paragon goes into how he is super, super curious about the face that he is now carved into. He's beardless and more youthful. It's more in keeping with his voice and with whom he felt himself to be, and yet it made him very curious to know he wore the face of someone Amber loved. She would not speak of him, but sometimes in the brushing touch of her fingers he glimpsed the man she saw in her mind. So he's kind of making jokes about this. Now I'm layer upon layer upon layer. Should I have a new name now? And Amber's like, no, Paragon suits you better than any other name could. Dragon and dragon, she kind of pries into him, and he brushes her off with another joke saying, oh, quite well, thank you, and how are you today? His dragons were his business, just as the identity of the man whose face he wore was hers. And Brashen now comes up on deck. So we get Paragon being super curious but not prying, and Amber being super curious about the dragons and her not being able to pry.
Yes. So I kind of like that balance in their relationship where they both respect each other's privacy, but still ask questions. I think that's a really fine balance to have in friendship.
Because they also bared secrets to each other that they hadn't really told anybody else. So they have that level of vulnerability, but still they have their protection, their secrets around them.
Exactly.
Brashen once more is coming up on deck and relays some of his worries to Amber, saying, like, I don't like you going out on there without a line for safety. At the clip we're going, by the time we discovered you were gone, it would be too late. Do you still fear I would let her fall unnoticed, Brashen? Paragon asked gravely. And then we switch over to Brashen's point of view for his response and feelings.
Yes.
So Brashen is looking at him, at Paragon, and there's a short but uncomfortable silence, and Brashen finally says, a captain's duty is to worry about all possibilities, ship. And then changes the subject, talks to Amber, saying, all right, nice gearing, so are you finished then? And Amber says, well, yeah, except for some smoothing on his face, and I may do some ornamentation on his accoutrements. Brashen is now reflecting over what Amber has done, like Paragon did. So we get a kind of a double here, how the plans are very in-depth as he had looked over them before. So she must have been working on those plans since they left Bingtown.
Right. So it says that she had accomplished an amazing amount of work in a very short time. From her myriad sketches, he surmised that she had been planning this since she left Bingtown. And I just want to say, I'm not convinced this was a plan from Bingtown. I feel like Beloved just sketches Fitz all the time.
Yeah, maybe.
Because, like, if there's a ton of sketches of Fitz's face, I'm not convinced that's not just an artist's muse being let out on paper. You know what I mean?
Maybe, but she was planning on reshaping Paragon from Bingtown.
Yeah, but I don't think she would have picked Fitz's face on her own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I'm sure she would have put a little bit of Fitz in there, but I think she was given permission. So that's like to make him into somebody a face that she loved. Mm-hmm. And so I feel as though these sketches of Fitz are like her collection of her Fitz sketches that she takes everywhere with her. The OG fangirl.
So in addition to the earring, Brashen says that there is a wide copper bracelet for his wrist and a leather battle harness pegged to his chest with a short-handled battle axe that hung from it.
Does Fitz wear a copper bracelet?
He must. I don't know.
I just found that detail to be a little odd because I don't remember him wearing a bracelet, but that doesn't mean he doesn't, I guess.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if it was like some sort of battle spoils that he got from the Out Islanders. Like when he fought on Antler Island, and the other Out Islander that was on their side fought against them and said, like, the guy that you killed was this guy's name. Did he get like something from him, or was that a necklace?
I thought it was a necklace, but I mean, maybe there was a matching bracelet. I don't know.
Yeah, don't remember. But Brashen says, handsome. And then to Amber says, are you going to fix his nose? There is nothing wrong with his nose, Amber asserted warningly. Brashen considered the crooked line of it. Well, I suppose a sailor should have a scar or two on his face, and a broken nose gives him a very determined look. Why the axe? I had to use the wood up, Amber replied, almost evasively. It's only ornamental. He has given it the colors of a real weapon, but it remains wizard wood. Very evasive and warning about, hey, there's nothing wrong with a broken nose.
There's nothing wrong with my beloved's face. Thank you very much.
Just funny. So Mother seems very approving at the changes in Paragon and kind of mumbles a little bit, and Amber agrees with her, saying, yes, it completes him. And I'm suddenly tired. So Brashen says, get some rest. We need to go over plans when we get to Divvy Town. And Amber's like, well, I thought we agreed that we didn't have any plans.
Right.
We're just going to go to Divvy Town and let the word out that we want to trade Kennit's mother for Althea. So they talk a little bit how there are definitely flaws in this, but Amber doesn't really want to address them. And she admits here, well, the whole plan is so riddled with flaws that one of that magnitude seemed too obvious to mention, saying that perhaps the whole town rising against us
to take back Mother.
Yeah, to gain Kennit's favor might happen. And she's like, well, I didn't want to bother mentioning that because there's so many other holes in there. And one of us has to remain positive.
And I do want to mention that throughout this, Mother is following the conversation and agreeing when she says that the plan is to ransom her for Althea, and then shaking her head whenever they're talking about other people trying to take her for favor with Kennit. So very much she's part of the team.
Right, yeah.
And she is part of this effort. This is not a hostage situation in any means.
So Brashen is kind of taking offense to Amber's tone here, saying, we gamble for Althea's life. This isn't a jest to me, Amber. Nor to me. I know you are worried to the bone, and justly so. But for me to dwell on that anxiety with you will not lessen it. Instead, we must focus on our hopes. If we cannot anchor ourselves in a belief that we will succeed, we have already been defeated. And then she goes into how she believes and has seen a time where they will all stand together again. Beyond that moment, I cannot see, but of that, at least, I am sure.
I want to read on a little bit because I think this is a really interesting detail. So after she says, beyond that moment, I cannot see, but of that, at least, I am sure. The carpenter's odd eyes had taken on a dreaming quality. Their color seemed to shift between dark gold and pale brown. It sent a chill up his back, yet he was oddly comforted by it. He could not share her equanimity, but he could not doubt her either. So, first, I wanted to mention, because this is Brashen looking into Amber's eyes. In the first book with Fool, Fitz mentions that it's really hard to look in Fool's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even Althea talks about how it's really unnerving to look Amber in the eyes.
Yeah.
And that's just like a characteristic of Beloved, is that it's hard to look them in the eyes. And here Brashen is looking in Amber's eyes and noticing, as she's talking about a future that she has seen that is definitely going to happen, her eyes shift from dark gold to pale brown.
Mm-hmm. Getting darker.
Yes. So I was wondering if, number one, the reason it's hard to look at the Fool in the eyes is because of this changing eye quality. Number two, is the eye changing indicative of a path going in the correct direction? Like this is a vision of the future in the correct direction.
I would think so, at least, as Beloved sees it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that whites get darker as they successfully fulfill the path.
Or enact changes that they're striving for or something.
Yeah, well, it seems that it's only people doing the same path that Beloved is going towards, because Prilcop also gets darker, but like the Pale Woman does not, even though she's successful in some of her things. So I think there is the path that they should be aiming for. So anyway, I just thought it was really interesting that in this moment when she's talking about a future she is seeing, her eyes get darker momentarily. Just, I don't know. I thought maybe it's a little glimpse at the correct future.
And then Amber asks if Kyle has told Brashen anything useful. And we get an update on Kyle of how he is the same old Kyle and has detailed how both Vivacia and Wintrose betrayed him. It's the only thing he willingly discusses. He speaks only evil of them both. It is harder to control my temper when he says Althea brought all her troubles on herself and should be left to face them the same way. He urges us to return immediately to Bingtown, to forget Althea, his son, the family ship, all of it. And when I say I will not, he curses me. The last time I spoke to him, he slyly asked if Althea and I had not been in league with Wintrow from the beginning. He hints that he knows we have all plotted against him. And apparently he has told the relative truth, his truth, of how Wintrow stole the ship from him and gave it to Kennit. And Brashen's like, does that sound possible? And Amber's like, I don't really know him, but yeah, it could be. There's things that happen that are extraordinary all the time. Right. Different circumstances that we don't know.
Right. I do want to quick touch on the fact that Kyle is sort of losing it. And interestingly, he's doubling down on his delusion that this is all a thwart against himself and that the only reason this is happening is because people hate him.
Right.
And there's nothing he possibly could have done to change this. And also just forget about all those people, all his haters, leave them behind. He'll start over back home in Bingtown, which is kind of crazy because what does he think will happen when he gets to Bingtown?
Right.
Like, I guess obviously he just wants to get away. He's scared and wants
PTSD
to be wants to be far away from Kennit. But I just don't understand the thought process of let's leave my son, the ship, and Althea behind and go back, and then everybody will welcome me with open arms. I don't know. But yeah, again, he also very traumatized. He was living in a cellar for who knows how long. And before that was kept in a cabin, to be fair, of his own volition because he didn't want to leave.
Right.
But obviously, very traumatic things have happened to him, and he's trying to suffer through that. And that has turned into him doubling down on being a jerk and feeling like the world is wronging him for no reason. No accountability per usual. Maybe he is a Vestrit.
Yeah, right. So Amber continues on saying, like, no, people can do extraordinary things, and I have seen it, Brashen. You skirt to the center of the vortex, So close you do not see how wondrous are the circumstances surrounding us. We are being swept toward a climax in time, a critical choice point, where all the future must go one way or another. Live ships are wakening to their true pasts. Serpents, reputed to be myths when you were a boy, are now accepted as natural. The serpents speak, Brashen, to Paragon, and Paragon speaks to us. When last did humanity concede intelligence to another race of creatures? What will it mean to your children and your grandchildren? You are caught up in a grand sweep of events, culminating in the changing of the course of the world. She lowered her voice and a smile touched her mouth. Yet all you can perceive is that you are separated from Althea. A man's loss of his mate may be the essential trigger that determines all events from henceforth. Do you not see how strange and wonderful that is? That all history balances on an affair of the human heart? He shakes his head, saying, That isn't how I see it, Amber. That isn't how I see it at all. It's just my life. And now that I have finally discovered what I must have to be happy, I'm willing to lay down my life for it. That's all. She smiled. That is all. You are right. And that is all that all ever is.
I just wanted to point out that sort of every big catalyst moment has been decided on the affairs of the human heart.
Right.
Even with Fitz's story,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Kind of the point of this, right?
yeah, Fitz being born, the changes that Fitz makes in his portion of the future that they're working towards, he does everything based off of who he cares about and making decisions for the ones he loves, whether that's Beloved or Verity or Ketrican or anybody. All of the choices that Fitz seems to make that make an important change happen because it's about his heart and what he's doing for himself and his love.
Right.
And I find that really, really interesting when it's laid out like that from Amber, that like to the person, it's just their life. Like Brashen says, I don't see it that way. It's just my heart. And Amber says, but that is it. That's all it ever is.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I like that sentiment.
But here we continue the tradition of Beloved scaring the simple person in front of her with these grand words and things and saying like the world hinges on you and your decisions, and the person being like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm just a simple sailor.
Yep. Mother had been watching the interchange intently. Now she smiled, a smile at once beatific in its peacefulness and terrifying in its acceptance. The expression was like a confirmation of all Amber had said. Brashen felt suddenly cornered by the two women, compelled toward he knew not what. He fixed his gaze on Mother. You know your son. Do you think there is any chance we will succeed? She smiled, but sorrow edged it. She lifted her shoulders in an old woman's shrug. Paragon spoke. She thinks you will succeed, but whether you will know you have succeeded, or if the success will be the one you would have chosen for yourself, well, those are things no one can say now. But she knows you will succeed at whatever you are meant to do. For a moment, he tried to unknot the ship's words and then says, Now don't you start with me too, he warns the ship.
Such a funny little,
Yeah.
not you too.
So that this part of the book isn't really, it's not moving a ton of the plot forward, right? It's a catch up of where we're at and kind of a reaffirmation that Amber is beloved, right?
Right.
Or at least like a coming out party for those who didn't know before.
Yes.
And it just kind of sets up of like what they're going to do.
And that this is very important. Either way, even if you didn't know and this is the first book series you started with, it's clear that something is going on. Beloved knows something. Amber knows something, and it's important. Whatever is about to happen is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this like we've been getting into the climax of this book and of the trilogy, right? The final kind of chapter of it, the act of it. And things have been happening, but this section of the chapter, nothing really happens. but just those confirmations of character, right? So it's kind of like a return to first and second book.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a break right before we dive into, the next upcoming chapters of a bunch of action happening. But the second half of this chapter is Malta. We move over to her point of view for a little bit here, and they are negotiating. Because we left them with Malta saying, I'm going to save our lives, Satrap, as long as you play along with me. I will figure out how to do it.
Yes.
I will get the pirates on our side and make the pirates want us to succeed.
Right. And in exchange, her family gets the only rights to deal with Jamalia as Bingtown is also given its freedom.
Yes, the satraps representatives in Bingtown, basically.
Yeah. As their own independent nation, which is a crazy,
right?
Like, I mean, she really put it all out there. And
to be fair, she in one negotiation gave her family like ultimate power, but then also hamstrung it because like saying, "Hey, we're going to be your representatives in this city, but we're also going to undermine your power in the city by making it independent." So it's not necessarily giving them supreme power over it, but like.
Yeah.
Very important people.
Yes. No, either way, super impressive. Great deal to have struck, especially because, he's obviously number one, not a bargainer. So she's got him there, but also he doesn't think it's going to work. So she really has him in the palm of her hand with this.
But also convinces him to play along just in case it does work.
Exactly.
So they're sitting at Captain Red's table right now, and Malta is negotiating, saying this is a fair offer, one that benefits all. I cannot see any reason why you would refuse it. Captain Red looked shocked. The others at the table were equally stunned. Malta had chosen her time well. The most difficult part had been persuading the satrap to do it her way. She had dressed and groomed him carefully, and by dint of badgering and begging, convinced him to come to dinner at the captain's table. She had dictated his manner to him as well, and he had complied, being courteous but not affable, and more silent than talkative. It was only when the meal was nearly over that he had cleared his throat and addressed the captain. Captain Red, please attend Malta Vestrit as she presents a negotiation on my behalf. And then Malta had presented her speech that she had practiced endlessly. She had presented the satrap's offer. She pointed out that the monetary wealth was not the essence of the satrapy. Power was. The satrap would not offer coin for his release, nor would he petition his nobles to do so. Instead, he would negotiate the terms himself. Speaking concisely, she outlined his offer. Recognition of Kennit as king of the Pirate Isles, an end to slave raids in the Isles, and the removal of the Chalcedean patrol vessels. And the finer points, of course, would have to be negotiated through Kennit, but it's a very handsome offer. And in her conversations with the crew, before she had offered this, she had gleaned the concerns dearest to them and kind of constructed her offer around this. Basically, it was fears about the slave raiders. She had distilled their desires into this offer. His silence was eloquent. He rubbed his chin and swept a glance around the table and then leaned toward the satrap. You're right, I thought only of coin, but this, you're truly ready to offer us these sorts of terms. I'd be a fool to let Malta say such things if I had not well considered them. Why? Why now? And Malta remains silent, and so does the satrap, just kind of smiling. And then the satrap does speak up and kind of plays his part. And Malta is surprised at this, but he does so very eloquently. Kind of speaking up, saying, like, I am a man who can learn from his errors. I'm not dumb, whatever. Like, really speaking up as a ruler of a country here, saying that going away from Jamalia City really opened up my eyes and my ears to the fact that my advisors either hid from me or were ignorant of themselves. My bold journey has borne fruit. My foolishness in leaving the capital will now shine forth as true wisdom. He had them in the palm of his hand after his whole speech. Everyone at the table waited for his next words. He leans forward and then tapped his finger on the table as he made each point. Malta was entranced. She had never seen this man. I find myself in the company of pirates, of men and women tattooed with the shame of slavery. Yet you are not what I was told you were. I do not find ignorance or stupidity amongst you, nor yet barbarism and savagery. I have seen the patrol vessels negotiated by treaty with Chalcid, yet I see far too many of them in my waters. They wallow with the wealth they have taken. Clearly I've put my trust in the wrong allies. Gemelia's city stands vulnerable to attack by the ships of Chalcid. I would be wise to seek truer allies. Who better than those who have already learned to do battle with the Chalcidians? So he really grasps them with his words and really excites them with this offer.
But I also think more importantly, it goes to show that even though we've only been seeing the satrap as this whiny, needy, drug-addled boy who can't do anything on his own and really needs the people around him to coddle him, he is sort of smart and capable of being a leader. Like, this is the nugget of leadership that was seen in him when he was young, you know?
Until when he was 11.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting to see the leader he could have been without people interfering and trying to get him indebted to them.
It's amazing what you can do when you're sober after a lifetime of drugs, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. He's really sort of coming into his own and using his own brain. I also really find it interesting because Malta, whenever he's asked why now, Malta sort of panics because she didn't prepare him for this question. She's just hoping he'll shut up and let her figure out how to talk them through this.
Right.
And he does have an answer. And I kind of do believe this is sincere. I think that what he has gone through, although all we've heard up until this point is that clearly it's Bingtown or somebody not the Chalcids taking advantage of him and trying to hurt him. I think thinking about his station and probably even this dinner have really helped to give him more perspective. And I really honestly think his naivety was a crutch and a downfall for him because he didn't know what was going on. He just took everybody else at their word. Mm-hmm. And now he realizes people can lie. And I don't know. I think it's a good growth for him. Still don't like him. But
I also do think this is part act too.
I
do agree with you, but like you said, he's also still blames the Rainwild traders. You know, he's forever gonna assort those blames out to different people and not himself. So I think this contrition and this like acceptance of like, oh yeah, you guys are so noble and really true allies is an act, and he's buttering them up a lot, but it's coming from a place where I agree with you. You know, where he has kind of learned a bit more of the world.
Yeah. And I guess you're right. I shouldn't say that it's all pure growth and that he really means every word he's saying. But you can see the courtier in him and that he does have knowledge of how to navigate these situations. Because I think, he's what, in his early 20s, mid 20s?
Something. Maybe 30. Yeah.
So I always thought it was interesting that Malta, who is 13 or 14, 15 maybe at this
14
point.
Probably.
Yeah, so a 14-year-old is like, let me come in here and help you. And he's going to just sit back and let her do it all. Like, he is still a grown-up. He has hopefully some sort of knowledge of how court speak happens. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see him put on the show of satrap, especially because I don't think we've gotten to see him do that with somebody that he... like in a way that would be like, oh, I'm the ruler and I'm trying to convey I'm a ruler and have power, because we've only seen him be whiny to people who, number one, already don't like him. And number two, are just, I don't know, like know him well enough to know that it's an act, I guess. Yeah. And so they're seeing through. I guess the one other time is whenever he first meets Malta, and at first she's taken by him and his act. So like he is capable of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we just forget because all the points of views are like how whiny he is and him not having to put on that show.
So Captain Red and everyone else is raising a toast to ransoms paid not in blood and gold. And they're going to celebrate a little bit and send a letter to Kennit when a cry of sail comes in. And they've spotted the Vivacia and the Marietta. So they don't even have to send a pigeon or a sparrow or a messenger bird to Kennit. He's already found them. And then we switch over to Kennit's point of view, who is watching a small boat from the Motley with mixed feelings. And Sorkor had come over to Vivacia for the occasion.
Sorkor is all dressed up as well. So at this point, it's a jump in time because Captain Red is standing on the other side of Kennit.
Mm-hmm.
And he is also clearly putting on some sort of show because he's brought such a great bounty to Kennit. And Kennit is feeling annoyed more than anything. Like, he's not excited necessarily about this. I feel like the vibe I get is, ugh, these idiots around me. I don't want to be here.
Well, it's both. He talks about how it is a great prize, but he's preoccupied with Althea at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment. And there's so many other things that he wants to be doing rather than this.
Yeah. Work is just not as fun.
Yeah. But I will say, I am very happy that we get Sorkor back. We have not seen Sorkor in a long time.
Yeah.
And even though he doesn't really interact or like say much in this chapter either, I'm still glad that he's around.
Yeah. He's made it.
Dressed in his garish red clothing. He's attired in several acres of scarlet fabric, Kennit says. Captain Red is dressed in his own garish garments and seemed too caught up in his own triumph to be aware of his leader's personal reservations. And so Kennit knows about Captain Red, and in his mind is like, for a man with his theatrical background, it was the ultimate achievement. Ever after, he would be known as the pirate captain who gave the satrap of all Jamalia to King Kennit as a gift.
Right. It's something that none of his other captains could ever hope to match.
Right. So it's like the perfect feather in his cap.
Yeah. And for somebody who has a background in theater, it's even better to add the theatrics to himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it says Kennit was both elated and annoyed at this. The capture of the satrap was remarkable, and the potential for gain from his ransom was vast. But this windfall also came at a time when his mind had another focus. Glances over at Althea. Jack, he notices, is always at her side. The winter wind blew through their hair and Jack's bright skirts and brought color to their faces. Jack was a stunning woman, tall, fair, and bold, but Althea captivated Kennit as no other woman could. So then he goes into the story once again, as we just passed some episodes where we talked about the reactions and from Kennit's point of view and everything. He goes into his side of the story again, where he is maintaining that it's just the poppy syrup and dreams.
He has to walk that careful line. He has to make her feel crazy and make sure that he never slips up to make it seem that he might be guilty.
Yeah, and he says that he had publicly apologized to her for the poppy syrup and the nightmares that it gave her, while also gently reminding her that she had asked for it because her back was injured.
And then whenever she gets angry at this public apology, he says, "It was when you said you liked lace on a man." So he's even trying to put it in the thought to everybody that Althea has a crush on him.
Right.
And of course she imagined this thing happening because she likes Kennit and had these nightmares with the poppy seed. So like the combination, it's clearly just her fighting her own feelings or whatever his idea is. But people don't believe Althea anyway. They don't really care. And she's just
reinforcing that.
Yeah. And he's finding pleasure in the fact that she's getting more and more frustrated with her lack of support.
Right. His luck had given him the power to adorn her as he saw fit. It's not his luck. But anyways, her lack of garments had forced her to accept the clothing he selected from his plunder and sent to her stateroom. So Althea had resisted for days, he notes, and even now she kept herself as plain as one could. But it pleased him that he chose the colors that she wore, and that he had touched the garments that now clung to her. So as gross as ever in his mind, he's talking about the power that it gives over her, you know?
Right. And like a caged bird, she must eventually come fluttering to his hand.
Yeah. She avoided him as much as she could, but Vivacia was not a large ship. He had met all of her stares with grieved concern and solicitous courtesy. Deep inside him, a bizarre merriment bubbled at her predicament. He had a power over her that he could never have foreseen, even if he had deliberately created the situation. She believed herself a wronged victim, but was treated as the hysterical accuser of an innocent man. If she spoke of the rape, her words were received with pity rather than shared outrage. Even Jack, who bore him an impersonal hate for the sinking of the Paragon, had reservations about Althea's accusations. A lack of support for her cause was undoubtedly very daunting to her desire to kill him. And then he goes on to say that most of the crew was uninterested in what he had or had not done to her. He was, after all, the captain, and the pirates were never overly afflicted with morality.
Right.
So,
and the only problem he's coming across is that some of the sailors are more affronted by the hurt to Edda with Althea's presence than they are about the idea that he would have hurt Althea.
Yeah, and the lack of Edda, too,
Yeah.
on board. He suspected that this was what troubled Wintrow most. He never spoke of it directly, but from time to time, Kennit would catch Wintrow looking at him speculatively. Fortunately for Wintrow, he did not do this often. Instead, he spent most of his time in a futile effort to establish some sort of bond with his aunt. So through Kennit's eyes, we're catching up on what has happened in the meantime while Amber has been carving Paragon and while all of these ships have been kind of converging at the same spot. So Kennit is mistaken, obviously, about what Wintrow is feeling.
Right.
He has some of the feelings, I think. Like, yeah, you did hurt Edda, and I do want Edda on board. But Wintrow, as we know, also believes Althea's story.
Right. And I think Kennit can't believe that anybody believes Althea. Like, he doesn't think Edda believes her, and he definitely doesn't think Wintrow does. So he can't come at it from that angle. So he's just like, obviously, this is about Edda.
And so, again, through Kennit's eyes, we learn what has been happening. And even though it seems that he has like a ton more information than maybe he should, Kennit is an observational guy, so observant guy. But we learn that Althea has continuously rebuffed Wintrow, but Wintrow managed to spend most of his free time within her vicinity. To busy him, Kennit had passed most of the day-to-day tasks of the ship's command on to him. His wits were far sharper than Jola's. If the circumstances had been different, Kennit would have moved him up to mate. He had the instinct for command. I had highlighted that because it is important to note that small passage, because later on during the climax, when Kennit does abandon the ship to protect the satrap and save the satrap, Wintrow assumes seamless command of the ship. And I think on the first time through, that kind of came out of nowhere for me because I think I skimmed this passage.
Fair, yeah.
Because it's like, I could pass it off. It's like, Wintrow's close to Kennit. The crew respects Kennit. Fine, they'll go with him. But he already has a first mate. Like, it should have gone to him. But this passage here kind of says Wintrow's taking control of the ship.
Yeah, Kennit is giving his blessing and providing him with practice to take control of the ship. And I think it makes more sense, especially having that detail more centered, that the crew would then accept Wintrow's command, not just, be like, okay, calm down, son, because obviously Kennit picked him himself. Like, this feels like Kennit's prodigy or whatever. And everybody feels that way about him. And so they do kind of give him that respect in a lot of regards.
Yeah, definitely. So Kennit has not been able to find time alone with Althea, which kind of grates on him a bit. But he notes that she spends much of her time with Jack, and then if not with Jack or in the stateroom, she goes to Vivacia. And it kind of amuses him that as much as time as they spend together, Vivacia is trying to convince Althea that he's not a bad guy. So he's very pleased with that.
Yeah, Vivacia spends a ton of time saying that there's no way Kennit would have mistreated her, which is so
not as she claims.
Yeah, It's just really frustrating, right? Like, as readers, rereaders, anybody with a heart, it's just annoying that he's like so smug about this. But it's even more so annoying to me personally that Vivacia won't drop it. Like, I
Right.
guess Althea's probably also bringing it up.
Yeah, Althea
fair.
probably won't drop it either, which
But
fair.
Yeah, also fair. But it makes me really frustrated that Vivacia is so insistent that Kennit can't possibly be what Althea.
Now, we are hearing this from Kennit's point
True.
of view.
True.
Right? And he's insistent that no one could possibly believe Althea. So, and we know from Althea's point of view that the ship also doesn't believe, but it might not be as one-sided as Kennit is presenting it.
Right. But it is still frustrating that Vivacia defends Kennit either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Vivacia is fully aware that Kennit is capable and shields him anyway. And for
Right.
what reason? Like, it just... I get that we're supposed to be frustrated, but like, couldn't Hobb have given us just one ally? Like, I guess we get Wintro, but I'll never be satisfied.
There's more frustration in the future when Althea and Brashen are reunited.
Yes, I know.
And Althea doesn't talk about anything, and Brashen gets frustrated because she's very distant, which again, understandable reactions from both of them. And Brashen's like, okay, so you did like Kennit. And now
I know. I don't want to talk about it till we're there. We're not gonna get into it, but I just like, again, it's realistic, but sometimes we don't need realism in fantasy, you know? Like, maybe just let it be fantasy and everybody believes her. I don't know.
So he also mentions that when Kennit goes up to the foredeck to talk to Vivacia in the evenings, Althea doesn't run away anymore, but instead eavesdrops on him and tries to pick apart his facade, but he's too good at it, you know? He's too courteous.
Yeah, he's had like, what, probably 25 years of practice.
Right,
I'm going to assume that when he was 5 years old, he wasn't. You get 5 to 10, he's not putting on an act, but, you know, 25 years minimum of this guy putting on an act. So this isn't going to shake him.
So now, finally, we catch up to the present once again. This is a very, again, this chapter is very weird to me in all these points of view because it switches a lot, and it's a catching up to where we are in the present, but it's all point of view. This is what I'm doing in the present. Let me think back over the past few weeks. And then end of the point of view, here we are in the present again. And then we do that over and over and over until finally we're caught up. But in the present,
converge into the present.
Yes, convergence. But in the present, Kennit ends his point of view by looking at the companion of the satrap and saying, like, "Oh, she's a young woman. She's white-faced, and even at this distance, her dark eyes seemed immense. Oddly fashioned turban atop her head was doubtless some new Jamalian fashion. But his mind keeps turning to Althea and is wondering how she would look in such a headpiece."
Right. So we know it's Malta, but it is really interesting to hear Kennit's first point of view of Malta.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find it really interesting. Everybody just assumes Malta is a companion, much to both Malta and Satrap Cosgo's disdain.
Right.
But I guess, like, why else would a woman be traveling with Cosgo? I don't know. But it is kind of funny that everybody's like, oh, yes, and the companion.
But honestly, it's a good thing that she's considered a companion.
Yeah.
Because
gives her more respect.
Yeah, exactly. People respect companions for being experts in some sort of, field.
Yeah, which I find really interesting because Cosgo has kind of diminished that role to just being his playmate.
Right.
Or plaything, I guess. But I guess the rest of the world maybe isn't so caught up on current affairs like that.
They never met him or his companions,
Yeah, true. Everybody just knows the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So it does definitely give her a bit of credibility. And I don't know. I think it's good for her.
But now we switch over to Althea's point of view, who is looking over at Wintro. And she is reflecting on how he has grown since they were in Bingtown. It was uncanny to look at him in profile. They shared so many features. It was like looking at herself made male. That he looked so like her somehow made his betrayal all the more intolerable. She would never be able to forgive him. A trickle of rebuke rose through the railing, and she repeats, I know, set it aside. Repeatedly, the ship had urged her to let go of her anger. But if she let go of her anger, all that would remain was grief and pain. Anger was easier.
Anger could be focused outward, grief corroded from within.
Yeah.
And I think that really explains her frustration with Wintro. I really think she has to have someone to be mad at that is quote unquote acceptable. And like in her mind, Wintro is her family. He should have stood up to her, and he let the ship go. He's one of Kennit's people. Like there's just a lot that she could be focusing her anger on for him instead of what happened.
And he didn't respond really well either in their one-on-one talk, or like one-on-two talk, I guess, with Jack there.
But even before that, just like his actions leading up to that weren't great.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that she's taking her anger out on him. It doesn't make it right, but it does make sense.
Yes. So she goes into that she can't let the matter go because it doesn't make sense. It serves no logic, and she could not argue with that. It was the act of a madman, but civil and shrewd Captain Kennit was certainly not mad. So what had happened? Images of Devon and Kefria were mixed with her memories of the attack. Could it have been what he said, a twisted poppy-induced dream? The ship had tried to placate her by suggesting that perhaps it had been some other crewman. Althea refused that. She clung to the truth as she clung to her sanity, for to let the one go was to deny the other. And then she goes on saying, like, in some ways it doesn't even matter if what happened because he still had sunk Paragon and killed Brashen and stolen Vivacia. So
it was enough reason to hate him.
Yeah.
Which I think is, again, like sort of a self-soothing measure of like, she is on such shaky ground because, like we've said, like the cards are really stacked against her. Nobody believes her. It doesn't make sense from just a logical standpoint on why Kennit would do it, because there is no logic to the act, right? It's not something that needs to make sense. He just did it. And that doesn't make sense with his persona. And so there is all that uncertainty, but at least there is the certainty that he killed people that she cared about and took people away from her. And I think at the very least that keeps her going with like, see, it's fine that I don't like him. It's not like I have to like him anyway. And I think that's more of just like a justification of I can stay angry. And I think if she didn't have that, it would be way harder for her to keep that anger, I guess, or to justify. And she'd be a lot more desolate, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, really frustrating. She has to deal with it at all because it did happen and it didn't make sense, but it did happen. And I just feel so bad for her. Not a great situation to be in.
Althea continues thinking about Vivacia here and how Kennit had stolen her away, and now she doesn't recognize some parts of Vivacia, and how Vivacia now agonizes over the plight of the serpents. The commitment that once belonged to the Vestrit family now went to those scaled beasts. Vivacia says to her in her mind, like, do you begrudge me that? Like, that's who I am. Should I pretend that I'm otherwise? Because that would be a lie. And Althea's like, no, of course not. Of course not. And yet, at the same time, that distraction left her adrift and alone.
Yeah. I think it's really hard because if Althea had learned about this and was not attacked and not in a situation where she feels alone in the world, she absolutely could get behind Vivacia's new identity and the truth of things and like helping the serpents. But she just needs somebody in her corner. And the one person she thought would always be there and would always understand is at every opportunity being like, we're not one anymore. I'm creating this boundary, and also like, stop talking bad about my man. I don't think he did it. Like, maybe something happened, but it wasn't with my man, which is frustrating. That it is really frustrating. And I think, again, with Wintro, where there's that like sort of understandable anger, the anger that she's having is going towards Vivacia's new loyalty to the serpents, but she's not actually angry about that. It's just like that's a more concrete thing that she can point to and say things are different because of this.
I will say, if in this perfect world where she was, the captain of Vivacia, and Vivacia started going through these changes and recognizing her dragon self and all that sort of thing, I think Althea would still be very, very, very hurt.
Yeah,
because that's who Althea built in her mind.
Okay,
is like that's one of her flaws, right? Is that Vivacia was always just going to be Vivacia. There's no growth, there's no change. It's part of my family. Sure. I need Vivacia as she is to be able to be who I am.
Yeah.
And that's something that Althea, even without this traumatic event happening, needed to learn. It's just like, I need to stand on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like if that happened, she would still be like, why are you shutting me out? I still think she would have somewhat similar response, just not as vehemently as it's coming across now, and not feeling as alone as it's coming across now. Because everything that's happening is amplifying her feeling of aloneness.
Right. I guess I feel as though in a perfect world, like the way I'm seeing this, I don't think she should have become captain right away. So I'm saying Kyle could have taken her for a year. She gets the ship's ticket, proves that she could, takes it, like goes to court, gets Vivacia back. Kyle never had slaves, so that never happens. And then Vivacia, with her time with Wintro, has opened up into this whole like, who am I? What's going on? And then whenever Althea takes control of her, they're able to bond and have discussions about her feelings. Althea is listening more and taking that into account.
Right.
I think there's like a more of an acceptance in that, because I think her growth from time apart from Vivacia would have given her more of that sense of self. Obviously not fully, but then there wouldn't be this like horrible thing that happened that leaves her feeling so isolated. Brashen isn't dead. Other people are gone. So like,
so you do agree that she needed like some growth in that way. Okay. That's we're on the same page.
Yeah.
I don't need
so not like, So not right away, but I think in a perfect world, she does have that growth and comes in and then she understands and is okay with it. But I think you're right. If she would have started right away as captain and this happened, it would have been hurtful to her.
Yeah. So it's with both of those things happening at the same time, her kind of realization that like, I can't be dependent on this person and this person can't be dependent on me because that's not healthy.
Yeah.
Happening at the same time as her needing support is awful.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard because on the one hand, I do think it's not healthy for Althea to put her everything into Vivacia. However, I feel like that is currently stemming from the fact that she just lost everyone she loves and Paragon and this horrible thing happened. Like, I don't think if she just would have been captured by Kennit, I don't think it would have been as strong of a need for Vivacia to be there for her.
Right.
And it's a crutch, right? Like, it's obviously stemming from an unhealthy sort of non-boundary that they had in their relationship before. But I think she wouldn't have needed it so badly if this didn't happen. And it's really unfortunate that Vivacia can't be there for her at all. And it like that, I think that part frustrates me because it kind of feels like Vivacia should try to be there a little bit. But then I also understand that it blurs the lines, that Vivacia needs to sort of create boundaries to keep herself. So, I don't know. It's really hard because I like a lot of my conflicting beliefs are meeting each other head to head, and I'm like, I don't know.
This conversation also kind of recontextualizes Wintro and Vivacia's clashes early on too, because Wintro was very self-aware.
Yeah,
he was very like, I am an individual and I meditate on what I have done wrong, what I can improve, all these sorts of things. And Vivacia was used to a no limits, we're relying on each other and part of one another kind of relationship. So the barriers that Wintro put up probably did separate them. And also, we talked about Wintro's feelings towards Vivacia early on, and we don't have to go back into that, but that just kind of adds another layer.
Yeah, definitely. And I do still think it was harsh of Wintro to like have absolutely no, we're not. But yeah. I don't know. There's definitely a happy medium that nobody's meeting, and I don't like that.
So Althea is like, yeah, no, don't pretend around me. I want you to be who you are. I'm alone. So she's wondering, like, how can I leave everything behind when over and over it recurred as a nightmare? She lost count of the times that Jack shakes her awake from these nightmares, and her traitor mind carried her from false memories of drowning with Brashen to a frightening struggle for breath in a dark bunk. The lack of sleep told on her judgment. She felt brittle and insecure. And here she is longing for some sort of support. There is something about that young woman in the boat, Vivacia murmured. Do not you feel it also? Sometimes I really am not a fan of Robin Hobb's phrasing of things.
Yeah.
Do not you feel it also?
Yeah, a little clunky. But Althea doesn't, more so because she's wrapped up.
Yeah, and she replies, I feel nothing. And wished it were so.
So sad. I hate it, but also love it because it's done so well, but like hate it because she has to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to quick point out, is it Malta's connection to Tintaglia that she is sensing from across the water, not the Vestrit bond?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is for sure. Because immediately, Malta is, when she steps on deck, she's greeted by Vivacia.
As dragon friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before that happens, we have a couple points of view first.
Right.
First one is Malta still in the boat looking up at Vivacia. And all the serpents are rising up around her and looking. The white-faced men pulling on the oars shared her fear of the serpents. She saw it in their set stares and straining muscles. As the creatures rose out of the water beside the boat, they stared at her with eyes of gold or silver or bronze. One after another, they threw back their heads as they passed the boat, trumpeting deep cries from their toothy scarlet maws. Not since she had dealt with Tintaglia had she felt such a pressure of sentience from another creature. Their gazes, fixed unwaveringly upon her, were too knowing, as if they sought to reach into her soul and claim her as their own. In terror, she fixed her gaze on Vivacia to keep from looking at the scaled monsters.
I think once again, this is the serpents recognizing Tintaglia's touch on Malta.
Yes.
And I don't know, being excited or confused about what that means. Like, why is this human coming by with a dragon's touch? Like, what is happening? And probably feeling like, oh, maybe now we'll get answers.
Right, exactly, yeah. It might feel like, this is confusing, but also different.
Yes, yeah. But I find that so interesting that they all are sort of looking at her. And it's really easy to just think, oh, well, that's how everybody's probably feeling. Like Malta's just, scared. But no, I think they really, truly are looking at her specifically and wanting to claim her because she has been claimed by a dragon.
Yeah. So Malta is reflecting on what has happened to prepare them for this moment. And the crew of the Motley, in all their theatrical fineness and being pirates, have stolen fine things from a lot of different people, including the Chalcidian ship that they got the satrap from as well, have a ton of finery and have dressed and primped and prepped the satrap to levels he was above the Bingtown ball where Malta first met him.
Yes.
So he's looking fantastic, and it has bolstered his self-importance to near unbearable level, in her opinion. And Malta had not been neglected. She is also dressed out in huge finery and has her face painted with makeup, and they're both looking very, very, very nice because the crew of the Motley wanted to present their gifts in the best possible light.
Right, to make them seem even more extravagant.
Yep. Malta's heart had sung at how they aided her in her role, all with the intent of making their gift to seem more extravagant. She would not let their efforts go to waste. So this just aids her in her negotiations as well. If they're presented in a better light, it makes them look stronger as well.
Right. But then her thoughts also drift to her father and hoping that she'll see him on the Vivacia and wondering what he'll think of her transformation.
And then she sees Wintro standing there. She came halfway to her feet. Wintro! He stared at her stupidly. The glimpse of gold hair on a tall figure made her heart leap with hope, but it was not her father who looked down on her, but a woman. The satrap scowled at her for her lack of decorum, but she ignored him. So she's scanning, hoping against hope that Kyle Haven would step forward and call her name. Instead, the hand that lifted suddenly and pointed at her belonged unmistakably to her Aunt Althea. Saw's breath, it's Malta, as we skip over into Althea's point of view.
Yes.
It can't be. Actually, it's Wintrow's point of view?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Wintrow's point of view. Saw's breath, it's Malta. Oh no, is it Kennit's point of view? Yeah, it's
Kennit's point of view. Sorry. I hate when they change point of views and it's really unclear because it starts with like one person's observations and then goes into like, oh, this is actually Kennit viewing that person's observations.
Yeah.
Right.
It starts with Althea, and then it says Wintrow joined his aunt at the railing, and then like a paragraph before it switches again, it talks about how Kennit is thinking.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so Wintrow's like, it can't be, but she does look very like Malta. Who is this Malta? Kennit asked despite himself. My little sister. She looks very like her, but it cannot be. Well, it would be an extraordinary coincidence, but we shall soon see, Kennit replies. As he's smoothing his hair, pretending to smooth his hair, the charm spoke close to his ear. There is no such thing as extraordinary coincidence. There is only destiny, so say the followers of Sa. Soft as a breath, it added, This is not good fortune for you, but the delivery of your death. Sa will punish you for abandoning Etta.
I just want to let you all know that I put a note at that little line and it just says, bruh. Because what do you mean that's what he's being punished for? I can't with this stupid charm. I'm still mad at him for saying, if you do anything to Althea, I'll tell everybody, and then keeping quiet. Like, this is your punishment for hurting Etta. What about all the other stuff he did, bud? Oh, I can't. It makes me so angry.
Okay, note it down right now that the charm is actually your worst enemy in these books.
No, but he is up there. He's right under Kennit. He has the face of Kennit. He might as well be Kennit.
Kennit snorts and puts his hand casually behind his back. He says he had not abandoned the whore. He had simply put her aside for later. Sa would not punish him for that. No one would. I mean, kind of true.
I mean, also, yeah, he's not wrong, but...
Then Wintrow spoke, and a shivering of dread ran down Kennit's back. He stared at the oncoming boat in the girl's upturned face as he said, almost dreamily, In Sa, there are no extraordinary coincidences, only destiny.
So funny to unnerve Kennit on accident.
Yeah.
Love that for you, Wintrow. Do it again, please.
Now we're back with Malta, and she's shocked beyond belief that Althea is there and Wintrow is there. What could it mean? Had Althea joined Kennit's pirate crew instead of rescuing them? She could not be so false, could she? What of Wintrow then?
Okay, so on the one hand, I get it. She's not expecting to see Althea there,
right,
or Wintrow, I guess. But on the other hand, it's so annoying because it's like, you know Althea now. Like, they spent however many months together planning this and like coming to some sort of respect,
right,
I guess. And she like spent all this time wishing she was her Aunt Althea to like gain more strength or whatever. And now she sees Althea and without hesitation is like, I can't believe she would join Kennit's pirate
questioning.
Group. She is questioning, but it feels like pretty decided that Althea's in on it. And that's really frustrating. But I guess what else is there to think?
She climbs up the rope ladders to the deck. It's difficult, but she was assisted on board, and a strange energy seemed to hum through her. She forgot to look for King Kennit as her eyes sought only for her father, and abruptly Wintrow was there, sweeping her into a hug. He had grown and muscled, and when he cried out, Malta, Sa himself has brought you safely to us. His voice was deep and sounded not unlike their father. Tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. And she surprised herself with the way that she clung to him as well, unreasonably glad of his strength and welcome. After a long moment of being held, she realized that Althea's arms were also around her. But how? How did you come to be here? Her aunt asked her. She had no desire to answer questions until the most important one had been asked, so she leans back, looks at Wintrow, and says, And Papa? The deep anguish in his eyes told her all. He He is not here, he told her gently, and she knew better than to ask where he was. He was gone, gone forever, and she had endured all, risked all for nothing. Her father was dead. Which, the classic kind of miscommunication, but for all intents and purposes, he is dead to Malta because she never sees him again.
Yeah, true.
And it's better to think that he's dead now
Yeah, but
than a captive.
she knows he dies later, right? Like she's aware he was on ship, or does everybody just decide not to tell her?
I think she figures out that he dies, but she knows in the next chapter that Kennit has him captive somewhere and he's alive, which kind of throws her off balance a bit. But I don't think it's ever told on screen or in the pages that Malta figures out how he dies.
Okay.
But then the ship speaks up. It says it was a same timbre as when Taglia spoke to her through the dream box, and a terrible recognition of kinship swept through Malta as the ship hailed her. Well met and welcome, dragon friend. That's where we end that chapter.
Yeah.
So lots of point of view switches, especially at the end there, kind of a setup looking back at the last few weeks and where what they've all done to get to this point and the tensions between all the characters.
Right.
But also, then we get negotiations, and then Jamalian ships sail in soon. And
I know, there's a lot happening. Convergence, indeed.
Right. Well, thank you for paying attention to this chapter and all the switches and
the little details that set up for explanations later.
Yeah, exactly. Really appreciate that for you tuning in. If you have thoughts or questions or comments on this episode, please let us know at isfitshappy@gmail.com. Message or comment on any of our social media posts, or message us directly on those accounts at isfitshappy, or on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube, Reddit. And let us know what you got going on. Send us pictures of your pets. Send us memes. Send us
your
just
tattoos.
Knock jokes. Send us tattoos. Whatever you want. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah. See you next week. All right, now we're going to talk about what you guys have brought to our attention. And this week, we're going to start with an answer to a question I put on episode 233, which is for chapter 28, Dragon Dreams. And my question was, why do you think Selden has more Elderling memories than Malta, even though Malta purposefully opened her mind to the memories in the city? And Ellen had a really interesting answer to that question. So Ellen's thought was Malta might be too overwhelmed with real world happenings around her to further focus on the memories of the city.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think in that scene when she is opened up and drowning in the memories, she kind of talks about how she's, in a trance and slowly losing them as she's moving through the city to escape, right?
Yeah.
She's like following things. And when she exits the city, she doesn't remember that much. And Selden's is a little bit different because it's coming to him in dreams. It's smaller doses.
Yeah.
So I think he wants to dive into that world a lot
True.
more. And Malta's was born out of stress and like, let me get out of here alive.
True. Yeah. I found that really interesting, the difference between the two. And I like that idea that like with the things that Malta is going through real world wise, she doesn't have time to ponder on the dragon memories.
Right. And that connection scares her too. Like in this chapter where she's talking about how that presence of the sentience, the presence of Tintaglia, and how that Vivacia reminds her of that is kind of scary to her.
Yeah.
Because that was a very bad time in her life.
Yeah. I think it's definitely an interesting relationship between dragons and Malta and all of that. But I do also wonder if she is also affected by it. I mean, like we said before, she's 14 and she's about to negotiate for the satrap and was able, I mean, she does really well. This is next chapter. She does the negotiations. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know very many 14-year-olds who can be in a room full of adults and be composed and poised and make adult level conversational points and be able to handle different emotional outbursts from adults and things. So
it would make so much more sense if those three children, Selden, Malta, and Wintro, were aged up 2 years.
Yeah.
It would make so much more sense.
Agree. But also, I think maybe we could, along with how Selden, we kind of write off his newfound maturity with the fact that he was touched by the dragon and has those memories. Maybe part of her maturity is coming from, I mean, I don't want to take away from the fact that she is a very capable young girl.
She has grown, definitely. We've talked about that,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
But that poise could definitely come from her years of lives that she lived in a flash.
Yeah. And the confidence and knowing what she's doing. Obviously, she was raised in a trader's family, but I don't know. It kind of feels like this later half of the book that's used a lot to explain why people are like, why she and others are really good at making deals, but especially the children.
Yeah.
And it's just like weird to me because I don't really feel as though Malta's childhood raised her to have had much knowledge of how traders work.
Right.
I mean, maybe it is ingrained in the culture and we just unfortunately don't get to see that. We just have to trust that haggling and deal making and all of that is something that every single trader child is raised with. But it just, I don't know.
She was, introduced more and more to that kind of life.
Yeah, definitely.
When we skipped over the Bingtown sections, right? It was a lot of catching up over the last few months. She's been looking at the books.
True.
So it could be some of that.
Agreed. Yeah. But anyway, I just thought maybe that's where her really well done maturity is coming from, despite being 14. I don't know. So
thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And we also had an email from Jess on episode 232, just kind of appreciating the discussion about the eyes. Kennit and Mother's similar, like eyes, they have the same eyes, but one is the strength, one is the weakness.
Yes.
And Ellen actually commented on that episode on Facebook as well, appreciating that kind of distinction and the comparison there.
Yeah. And just the differences in how it's phrased and the things that Hobb is doing. I think Robin Hobb has a lot of parallels in her work.
Yeah.
In these books, in the chapters and the characters, it's really fun to read for me, I guess. Yeah. But I do always really appreciate when they're
kind of a repeated theme like that.
Yeah.
Like in this chapter too, I wanted to bring it up because Amber's eyes are a focus for a little bit.
Yeah.
Of Brashen looking into them, and they go from a dark gold to a pale brown, right? And he's kind of spooked by them. And you brought up earlier that people have difficulty looking beloved in the eye.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like a repeated theme throughout all that. Similar to how cats are like dragons and things like that.
Eyes seem to be very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. And also shout out Jess for having a huge crush on Brashen and enjoying our love to him on that episode. The one time we're nice to Brashen.
Hey, I'm nice to Brashen a lot.
That's fair. I like Brashen too. I think I'm hard on everybody. I'm just the mean one of the two of us. But
you're hard on people that we consider protagonists.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you want them to do better,
Yeah.
The same way we were hard on Fitz sometimes.
Yeah.
Just like
I'm a real tough love kind of person, unfortunately, for those around me. But no.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the email and the comments about that. It's fun looking at Robin Hobb's writing on like a macro level rather than just what's in the pages.
Chapter, yeah. No, it is fun. That's why we do the podcast, I guess. So thank you to everybody who wrote in. We appreciate hearing from all of you, and we can't wait to hear what you guys have to say next week.